Yeah, anyhow, this is a very exciting presentation with Michael, Fritjof, and Doug. And this is the book here, R.D. Laing in the 21st Century. And of course, you're going to hear all about it. But, just having looked through it, it's some of the best papers and talks that have been given over about the last 10 years or so.
Mhm.
And so Michael, Doug, and Fritjof were always the most exciting talks. These were the heaviest hitters every year. Michael had years and years of a relationship with R.D. Laing and worked very closely with him. Doug also, they all knew R.D. Laing closely in different ways, and of course that's part of what you're going to hear about today. And so we're going to start off with Michael.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, James. Um, so the way we're structuring this is I'll talk for about 10 minutes, and then Douglas will talk 10 minutes, and then Frithjof will talk 10 minutes. We're the three co-authors of the book. So I've been assigned the role of just giving you an overall picture of why and how did this book come into existence and our relationship to it, and of course to R.D. Laing. I'm assuming that everybody, all of you, either know one of us um, or you're interested in R.D. Laing. So I will say a little bit about Laing for those who may not be all that familiar with him, except for the name, and just kind of give an overview of what the book is about. Um, so yes, as James was saying, I've known New Lang for quite a while. I went to England in 1973 to study with him. I was a graduate student in San Francisco. I gave that up and decided Laing was really where things were, and he was the most famous psychiatrist in the world in the 70s. He was like a rock star, and he really tapped into the counterculture, that was late 60s, early 70s. That was kind of the heyday of it, and everybody in college was reading R.D. Laing and The Politics of Experience, which was the book that really made him famous. But he wrote many books. And what attracted me to him was he was this very exciting, brilliant thinker and writer. And more specifically, he was an existentialist, a philosopher, as well as a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. And that was my passion. How do you integrate existential philosophy and psychoanalysis? And Laing was really the man who had taken that on at that particular time in history. So a lot of Americans went to work with him. He was most famous for setting up a residential house that was designed for people who wanted an alternative to mental hospital. They didn't want to be treated for schizophrenia. And he pioneered this idea, and that's what partly attracted me to want to work with him. So while there, I was there for 7 years. I did my psychoanalytic training with him and the Philadelphia Association, his group, and lived in one of the post-Kingsley Hall houses, a place called Portland Road, which I do write about, by the way, in the book. It's the first chapter. And that was a life-changing experience. Just to be living with people of various mental states. Not all of us, of course, had been in a hospital, but it was a fascinating journey and fit in really well with the 60s ethos of getting to know yourself, really take LSD, go into psychoanalysis, do meditation, go to India. It was a very spiritual and philosophical era. that came and went. And of course, this was something that Fritjof and Doug and I all shared. We know each other through Laing. We each had our own relationship with him, and indirectly, that facilitated our getting to know each other. And when I came back to the US in 1980, I set up Free Association, which was a kind of homage to Laing, to carry on the teaching, the analytic training, um, and um, uh, and fast forward to 2013, as the 25th anniversary of Laing's death was approaching. I had the idea of organizing a conference in New York called R.D. Laing in the 21st Century and invite people that I knew in the UK and the US who all knew Laing. And we would all talk about our own particular connection with him. And it was an amazing weekend and very moving for many of us. And we decided, well, why don't we do this every year? Why just a one-off? And so we moved it to California, to Esalen Institute in Big Sur. Most of you probably heard of that. Laing had a long history of a relationship with Esalen. We thought that'd be a wonderful venue. And many of us lived in the Bay Area, so that was close by. And that's really how the book came into creation. Each year, we meet for a week and we adopt a theme that resonated with Laing's legacy and his writing. And so this book really took 10 years to write because it's the talks that Fritjof, Douglas, and I gave each year following the theme that happened to be that year. So the book is really divided into 6 sections, 6 of the themes. Sanity and madness was the first one. What is therapy? Altered states, authenticity, healing. And we each were assigned the task of addressing those themes in our particular way. So, of course, as we say in the book, one of the authors is a psychoanalyst, one is a scientist, and one is a philosopher. And we each have our own perspective and relationship to Laing, given that. So, of course, most of my thinking and writing and talking is related to therapy. For Douglas, it would be more philosophical, Laing, the thinker. Uh, and of course, with Fritjof, our scientist, and he knew Laing also from the 70s. The Tao of Physics, was something that everybody had to read, and that's how Fritjof got to know Laing, and they became very good friends. Um, so you'll see that each of us has taken on that theme in our own particular way. Um, so we couldn't include every single, of course, year, but we've taken what we thought was the highlights of it, and um, and that's why it exists. Actually, putting it together was very easy because all of the work had been done over the last 10 years. So we're very excited. Hope that you all get a copy of it. I think my 10 minutes is up, so I'm going to move things over to Douglas.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm really delighted to see so many of you here from around the world. And I think this is, wait a minute. Uh, right, for our launch. Uh, and I think this is a unique and invaluable book. And certainly, as Mike was saying, it had a interesting 10 years or more, that works that we it took to get this together. And hopefully it it's been distilled. It's distilled, and it's got some good content, let's say, and it critically explores the essence and inspirations of Laing. It's a result of virtually a decade-long gestation, as Mike was saying, of exploring the interstices of the nature and implications of R.D. Laing's major contributions to our understanding of existential psychology and psychiatry, mental health, modern society, and the human condition. That's all. The the new school and free association, which is sponsoring this launch, have been inspired, as you know, from Laing and Freud, melding psychoanalysis and existentialism into a powerful approach in the areas of mental health and understanding the human condition and healing. During the 1960s and 70s, like many at the time, I rode the wave of the counterculture and the new ways of understanding the relationship between the individual and society, particularly in relation to mental health. And Lang fit with all that very much. He was a major figure in the zeitgeist, as again Mark had said, in the 60s and 70s in Britain, the US, and globally. His 1967 book, The Politics of Experience, was mandatory reading to a broad public from college students, especially in the United States, mental health professionals to social critics, and generally cool Britannia who were they were enjoying sex, drugs in combination with the rock and roll of the period. The origins of this book lay, as has been adverted to, that the previous conference at Wagner College in Staten Island, which was an amazing reunion and resulted in the book R.D. Laing in the 21st Century. And that successful conference inspired a further meeting at Esalen in 2015. And that was so successful that we have met almost every year since at Esalen and more latterly at Asilomar, also in California.
The first
Oh,
book was The Legacy of R.D. Laing.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped. You're completely right. Yes, the legacy of R.D. Laing, and now this current one's the R.D. Laing, the
Speaking of the
21st.
devil, here's the book if you haven't read it.
Great. I want to say a few things now about Laing, who was born in Glasgow in 1927 and died early in 1990 of a heart attack on a tennis court in Saint-Tropez. During the 60s and 70s, he was the most famous psychiatrist in the world, as we've heard, and had opened up new skeptical approaches to mental illness and a very real new philosophical approach to the nature of the individual, society, and the human condition. Laing was very indebted to Sartre, to Jean-Paul Sartre, whom he saw as providing a what he called a gateway into existentialism and phenomenology. Sartre uh, provided the prism through which he early assiduously devoured Buber, Martin Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, and such entitled his uh, collected works situations during in the 1940s. He called it situations, in which he understood individual actions as always situated within particular contexts. From the start, context and politics are very important concepts in Laing's work, all the way from his focus on the agency of the self through all, though always in relationship with another in the divided self, through the self in explicit relationship to the other in a further book of his, The Self and Others, to the family group in Sanity, Madness, and the Family and Interpersonal Perception, and through political groups in the politics of experience and transcendental experience in 10-day voyage and the politics of experience and knots. Later in the 1970s, after his return from what he told me was a sabbatical in India and Ceylon, he went on to understand the impact of contexts such as the pre-birth and birth experience, psychiatry and theory and practice, the impact of the technocratic ways of thinking, and the nature and possibilities of love. Like Michel Foucault, to whom he was indebted, he was concerned with the context and the way we think and are affected by our models. Throughout his approach was to take an existential phenomenological journey into the nature of reality, experience, relationships, and conceptual models. As Freud listened to neurotics, so Laing listened to psychotics, whom he saw as agents whose behavior was potentially intelligible. My 1977 book, The Schizoid World of Jean-Paul Sartre and R.D. Laing, adopted a psychosocial approach to examining the uh, development of Lang's ideas, the career of his concepts as they increasingly focused on context and communication. However, it was only really after I'd written the book that I met Lang and his colleagues, including Hugh Crawford, who did his best to oversee the Asylum Community House in Portland Road, London, where I first met Mike and resided during 1975 and 76. During the 50s, when Lang was working in backwards and later at the Tavistock Clinic, many psychiatrists accepted that the speech of neurosis and not psychosis was potentially intelligible. Freud insisted neurosis was intelligible, that dreams, slips, and uh, slips of the tongue and symptoms were disguised expressions of human subjectivity, which could be interpreted using free association. Lang did for the psychotic what Freud had done for the neurotic. He attempted to listen to psychotic patients and treat their speech and actions as potentially understandable and meaningful. Psychotics for Lang were not beyond all reason, and like other humans, psychotics could be reframed as agents whose experience could be understood as meaningful. Psychosis always involves problems of communication. Schizophrenia, Lang told me once in 1980, is the name a psychiatrist gives for somebody they can't understand. Never having found difficulty in listening to schizophrenics, Lang could not resonate with Bleuler's remark that when all was said and done, schizophrenics were stranger to him than birds in his garden. For Lang, such a lack of understanding of the world and of the psychotic was not so much a given one as constructed. Karl Jasper's classic postulation of the ununderstandability of psychotic phenomena, which manifested what he called an abyss of difference between sane and psychotic experience, was a dichotomy which Lang constantly challenged throughout his life. The divided self, uh, the thoughts and actions in the divided self, the thoughts and actions of psychotics were understood to be expressions of human subjectivity, not simply emanations of psychobiological processes. Although there had been some previous discussions on the understanding psychosis, uh, the Lang's book, The Divided Self, in 1960, was a pioneering work in systematically trying to understand where the patient was at. Since seen in context and from the point of view of the patient as an agent, madness could be understood as resulting from choices within psychosocial and biological parameters. As Marx said, my role in Esalen was to critically explicate Lang's concepts around the various themes at each year's conference. And it was a welcome opportunity there to continue my exploration of Lang's conceptual trajectory. For this book, we chose, as we've said, we've had the six major themes from a decade of meetings. I'm I'm proud of this book as being a significant achievement in critically exploring and uh, assessing the major contributions of Lang across the board in our understanding of contemporary existential psychology and psychoanalysis, communications, mental health, technology, and society. Lang's not caught in a time warp. He and his work inspired new, relevant, and fresh ways of skeptical philosophical thinking that are most relevant to the problems of our age. So I hope you buy and enjoy the book. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. That was great. Free-off. So let's.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everybody. I'm delighted to be here with you all. My relationship with Artie Laing was somewhat different from that of Michael and Douglas. I never worked with him or studied with him, but I knew him well during the last 12 years or so of his life, from the late 70s to the late 80s. During those years, we met many times, either just the two of us or with our families and friends. We saw each other at conferences, gave joint seminars, shared panel discussions, and so on. I was very attracted by Laing's extensive knowledge in so many fields: philosophy, science, theology, music, literature, and so on, and also by his often dramatic and passionate way of arguing. A central theme of our discussions was the nature of experience and the challenge of developing a science of experience. Laing argued forcefully that classical Galilean and Newtonian science had no way of dealing with consciousness, experience, values, ethics, or anything referring to qualities. Lang's critique of Galileo's method was passionate. Let me quote him from a discussion we had in 1980. Galileo said that the scientific method was to study this world as if there were no consciousness and no living creatures in it. Only quantifiable phenomena were admitted to the domain of science. This has been the most profound corruption. Galileo's program offers us a dead world. Out goes sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell, and along with them have since gone aesthetic and ethical sensibility, values, quality, soul, consciousness, spirit. Experience as such is cast out of the realm of scientific discourse. Hardly anything has changed our world more during the past 400 years than Galileo's audacious program. And then he ended, we had to destroy the world in theory before we could destroy it in practice. That made me shiver and still makes me shiver. Well, eventually in subsequent discussions, Laing accepted my view that the systemic understanding of life that is now emerging could provide a framework for a science of consciousness. He maintained that a true science of consciousness would have to be a new type of science dealing with qualities rather than quantities and being based on experience rather than verifiable measurements. The data of such a science would be patterns of experience that cannot be quantified. Well, about a decade later, the beginnings of such a science were indeed developed. Its central challenge was, and still is, to explain the experience associated with cognitive events. Different states of conscious experience are sometimes called qualia by cognitive scientists because each state is characterized by a special qualitative feel, as Laing put it. In the mid-90s, the biologist and neuroscientist Francisco Varela proposed a new approach that embraces both brain physiology and the analysis of first-person experience. Varela called this new school of thought neurophenomenology. It is an approach to the study of consciousness that combines the disciplined examination of conscious experience with the analysis of corresponding neural patterns and processes. These cognitive scientists are indeed taking the first steps toward formulating a true science of experience. I don't know to what extent these scientists were influenced by Laing's view on the centrality of experience in human consciousness, which he published in 1982 in his book, The Voice of Experience. All I know is that my own attempts to map out a science of qualities, integrating the biological, cognitive, social, and ecological dimensions of life were triggered by my dramatic discussions with Adi Laing. All right, back to you, Michael.
Oh, thank you so much for boy, this is almost like speed dating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Zooming through, but anyway, we've each gotten a chance to say a little bit. I'm going to turn things over to James to moderate discussion. We really hope we have at least another half hour to play with whatever thoughts come to you. James?
Yeah, so
Michael, could I make another comment, James, before you start?
Yes.
You both talked about Laing's approach to mental illness, and this is encapsulated in a famous statement he made in this book, The Politics of Experience, where he wrote that madness does not necessarily need to be breakdown, it can also be breakthrough. Several decades later, this process, now known as emergence, the spontaneous emergence of new order at critical points of instability. This was discovered and explored in the language of complexity theory. So once more, Adi Laing was completely prescient, and this time by several decades, with his famous dictum, not necessarily break down, but break through.
Yeah, I love that, Fritjof. I mean, this is one of the things we haven't really had a chance to bring up. But one of the things that I think is so endearing about Laing, why so many of us really adored him, he really talked more about love, I think, than any psychoanalyst ever. Obviously, a lot of that came from Freud, who, was a little cagey about it. He didn't want to be too explicit. Laing was very explicit that that's what's missing in science, for example, in your critique, Fritjof, where's the love? And for him, that's always there in every human interaction. And we all really were very, very impacted by.
Yeah, he not only talked about love, he embodied it. And my relationship, at least, and yours, I'm supposing too, my relationship with him had always had a strong emotional coloring and physical coloring.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. All right, James.
yes, yeah. So we have some time for discussion, so feel free to If you know how to use the raise your hand, button, you can do that or just kind of signal and I'll keep track of you guys. And yeah, I see Stephen.
Jeremy had his hand up, I think.
Oh, okay, and then we'll do Jeremy after that. Thank you.
Okay. Uh, this is a question for Mike, I guess. I just wondered, what would you say is the difference between the book that you've just published and the legacy of Laing?
Well, that's a good question, Stephen. Thanks. The legacy book was taken from almost all of the papers given at that conference in New York in 2013. And it was in a way all over the map, because each person had his or her own personal take on their relationship to Laing. The book that we're talking about now, which comes from about a decade of these annual symposia, here we're very selective. There's at least a dozen people every year that give talks at our annual symposia. But they're very different in the way that they're presented. Some of them are more experiential, some of them are more dramatic. They don't all lend themselves to papers, that you can put in a book. And that was really, in a way, the task that Fritjof and Doug and I took on. We wanted to really explicitly address the legacy of Laing. Now, of course, we wanted to do that in 2015 book. That's when it was published. But here we had the advantage of each year really thinking about the theme and coming up with something that each of us really had given a lot of thought to. And given the nature of the symposia, they were relatively brief. You'll find that these chapters are more like 10 pages instead of typically 20. It's short and sweet, getting right to the point and the heart of what it is that we want to talk about. So we feel that this book gave us the luxury of spending a whole decade really thinking, who was R.D. Laing and why is he so important in the 21st century? Why is he not just a historical figure, but as Fritjof has very clearly shown, cutting edge, really thinking ahead of time. And just now, people are beginning to come up with ideas that clearly go all the way back to Laing.
I also think, Michael, this book has more original thinking of each of us. It's not just about Laing, it's about this whole universe of his thinking. But we had original contributions. I can think of several chapters in the book that I wrote, which I haven't published anywhere else. And I think the same is true for you and Douglas.
Absolutely true, Fritjof. Doug was assigned the job of reviewing what Laing had to say about each of these themes from both his published and unpublished lectures. Whereas Fritjof and I were, in a way, more coming from our own world. Most of my talks actually have to do about different contexts where love comes into the discussion, into the picture. Fritjof, systems theorist, bringing what's going on today in science and how that connects with Laing and his thinking and his legacy. So in that regard, yes, Fritjof and I both enjoyed the opportunity of doing our own thing, in effect, and then connecting that kind of indirectly to how that connected with our relationships with Laing.
The other thing I'd add about the involvement with writing about what Laing had to say is that it wasn't that easy to know what he said because he wrote it in different contexts. There are a lot of different ways he presented it. He presented at different times, different ways. He did it in lectures. He'd do it in interviews. He'd do it in his writings and so on. So there was a lot of uh, places to find stuff. And then you had to put it together and to get the gist of what it was that he was saying about a particular topic intellectually. And that was very interesting, just being able to get that together. And my impression is that actually this hadn't been done effectively before. It was just, people like Laing or they don't like him, or they say he's past his use by date or whatever. But in terms of actually understanding the intellectual thrust of what he was doing, it was I very much enjoyed just continuing to to draw that out.
Yeah, our advantage was that we all knew Laing.
Yeah.
Almost everything that's been published about Laing is by authors that never even met him. They're just going on his published work. But for us, it was very personal.
Yeah.
I'd like to maybe we have a queue starting to form up. If maybe Jeremy, and then we can go on to Dr. Jan and David. Jeremy, did
Thanks,
you
James.
stop?
Yeah, thanks for putting this on. And yeah, I'm excited to read this book. I'm really looking forward to it. Something you just said, um, Michael and Fritjof, you both just talked about love. And so I'm really curious to hear more about, what was the experience of loving Laing like, and what was and what was it, and in what ways did Laing love? I'd enjoy hearing about the sort of texture and experience of relating to Laing.
Well, for me, it was dramatic. It was emotional and dramatic. I remember shortly after I first met him in London, we went to a restaurant and he explained the double bind theory of schizophrenia to me. And he said that when somebody stretches out a hand to you and you don't know whether they will hit you or will caress you, then this is an example of double bind. We were in this restaurant and I wasn't sure whether he would really hit me or not. I mean, I was sort of scared and fascinated at the same time. And a little bit of that being scared and fascinated by him persisted in all of our encounters. And it ended up, being a very close friendship at the end.
Yeah, I would say exactly. You hit the nail on the head, Fritjof. It was like tough love in a way to know Laing. It was indirect. He wasn't somebody who would just express how much he liked you or valued you. Um, there was always something challenging about being with Laing. And, he was my boss. I was the administrator of his organization. So we met constantly. I got to know him on a level that no one else could because I got to see all of his decision making about how his organization should work. And he was a very hands-off kind of person. And yet he created this community that was clearly supposed to be a very loving community. But he introduced me to ways of understanding love that I certainly had not been familiar with. That it's almost the Greek erotic, conception that there's a dark side to it as well. And, a lot of Lang's writing about love was about how people, are really pretending to love you, but there's a lot of violence in that relationship. Um, and yet you couldn't help but feel the heart that was coming from Laing. And, he was constantly criticized and condemned by the world of psychiatry that he was so much invested in trying to change. Uh, and yet he managed to handle that. It's true, he could in a lecture, if you upset him, he would just attack you right then and there and not hold back at all. And we've all seen Lang do that many times. So yeah, there was
At the
something a little
same
scary
time,
about him.
at the same time, he could be extremely tender and go beyond all conventions. I remember once I met him after I hadn't seen him a couple of years, and he looked at me and he said, Fritjof, you have a new wrinkle. And he touched my face, in a very tender way, like a lover would do, you know. So he went beyond these conventions.
Yeah, very, very amazing. Um,
I,
um, yeah.
if maybe we could move on to Dr. Jan there.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what I want to say. I loved Lang, and I don't disagree with anything that's been said so far. I think I'm a little bit uncomfortable with what feels like something of an idealization of Lang in this discussion. Lang, um, maybe I should say that I was involved with the Philadelphia Association from 1973 to 1990. I had a year of therapy with Lang, 74, 75, and then Lang supervised my first 8 years of practice of psychotherapy. So, I remain deeply indebted to Ronnie Lang. At the same time, I found him very troubled, deeply alcoholic. At one point in the early 80s, he asked me if I thought he was insane. I was in his consulting room. It was very hard to know what to say to that, to R.D. Laing, who talked about madness more than anyone. I didn't want to just blow smoke up his ass, as we say in Australia. So I said, I kind of looked around the room and said, well, if you're insane, all of these books on your shelves are wrong. He also, was unwell physically for some of the time. He talked to me about having blood running out of his ass. And although I wasn't a medical doctor and he was, we had quite an in-depth discussion about what was going on in his gut. So I guess to bring it to a question, I just wonder if you would like to say anything about, some of the complexity and some of the difficulty, some of the negative side of R.D. Laing, maybe to balance out what I found in him an enormously complex sort of character.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Chan. One of my papers in this collection explicitly addresses what you're talking about. In fact, it's called The Dark Side of Authenticity. It's all about Lang's relationship to being authentic. And yet, uh, sometimes you wondered, is he being authentic here or is he just being mean? And maybe in some ways there is a relationship between being mean and being authentic. Anyway, I gave this paper originally at I think it was about maybe the 25th anniversary of the Philadelphia Association. They had a conference to honor that 25 years, and I decided to give this paper to all these people who loved Lang and really, thought he was a kind of god. And there were quite a few people that were very unhappy with my talk, including Utah, his wife or widow. And so, yes, yeah, this is partly what's so fascinating about Lang. He was very troubled and suffered quite a lot and used drugs to help him tolerate that. Not exactly the picture you would normally have a very enlightened, wise teacher.
Right.
And yet Laing was a very enlightened and wise teacher, and still this very troubled person who I don't think had a very happy life.
No.
I just felt sympathy for him. I didn't really judge him for that. It didn't stop my appreciation for the gifts that Lang actually did have. But yeah, he alienated a lot of people that worked with him. Almost one by one, they all had falling outs with him. And I bring that up as well. But yeah, Jan, I mean, what can you do? I mean, he was the
Yeah.
first to say that he was not a role model, or
Yeah.
perfect.
Were you there when Hugh Crawford said that Ronnie drinks to come down to where other people are trying to get up to?
Yes, I definitely remember him saying that. Yes.
Yeah. I had a big fight with him once, and it was very public. We were in a group, and I had a really big fight with him. He attacked me, and
Hmm.
and I said, you know, for 8 years I've been hearing gossip about you, and I've never once done anything with it other than check it out with you first. And now you've heard some gossip about me, and you just believe it and attack me. Um, we
Well,
had a
that's
big.
Ronnie. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
Ronnie, and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
came
You just
to
have to
my house with
kind of have a sense of humor about this stuff, I think.
I would put it a little differently. I would put it a little differently. I would say that Ronnie had a very good idea as to his various proteges, where their Achilles heel lay. And if he was in a cantankerous mood, to use your word, Mike, he could be mean. And I remember once being at a party with Mina Semyon, and Ronnie came over to me, and he knew that I had a very, very passionate attachment to David Cooper. And he just came over to me. He was absolutely pissed. And he said, "The reason David Cooper hates your guts is you're nothing but a tourist." And so that was the dark side of authenticity, you could say.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Well,
And it-
yeah, we have a few more. We go on to David.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I know something of Lang, not a lot, but the something I do know. I know Douglas, and my friendship with him goes back, I don't know, near on 50 years now. But as I sit and listen to this, and there was we sort of talked around before proceedings officially started. Um, and artificial intelligence was mentioned a few times. And that kind of almost, for me, as I've listened to this conversation, sort of led sort of really wonderfully by the three people who not only read him extensively, but also knew him personally. And it sort of seemed as that sort of a stake that we stuck in the ground. Sort of so much of our conversation these days sort of revolves around artificial intelligence and what it is and what does it mean and where it's going to lead us and who knows what, everything. And I've sort of wondered throughout as I've listened to the conversation, and for Laing with the centrality of experience and, it's something that I'd never sort of realized until I heard about it and saw it in the book chapters of love. And I've sort of wondered and this is really the question, I think, if there is a question that I'd have for the moment, and it's for each of Fritjof and Mike and Doug. If Laing was sitting here and listening to all of this, and probably in some respect he is, we just can't see him. What would he say? What is his next? Is his next book The Politics of Artificial Experience? not artificial intelligence? I mean, what would, in a couple of lines, it's obviously a big question, and maybe it's sort of addressed in the book, and I haven't seen the book yet. What would Laing be saying? What would his contribution to this conversation be? It would probably occupy the entire space, I'd imagine. But if that's the question, that's my wondering, is what would he be saying? That he wasn't saying that we sort of say so much of what he said 50 years ago was so prescient. Okay, so
Yeah.
here
Well,
we are, here we are now.
you have any thoughts about that
Yeah,
question?
I would say continuing my thoughts and report about his damning judgment on Galileo, who
Yeah,
took
that's where it started, Frito.
reality.
Hmm.
He would start there and say that there is a living intelligence, that intelligence is a quality of all life, whether
Mm.
it's plants or animals or humans or microorganisms. And this intelligence is mainly the ability to be in the world, to move in the world, to survive in the world, which is totally different from artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is sort of the mathematical periphery of our human intelligence, dealing with mathematical models and algorithms and things like that. And of course, all this came way after Lang died. So I'm just fantasizing of what he would say, but he might go in this direction, I think.
Oh, I
Living
think he would have a
intelligence
lot of
is,
material for that central message. What's happened to our humanity?
yeah.
And that would always be Lang's theme. And he would recognize that in ways that most of us don't even notice.
Mm.
One of his favorite themes was the concept of madness.
Mm.
And why is it that some people who are quite mad end up in mental hospitals and get diagnosed and treated, and other people who are quite mad run the world?
We have one of them now.
And why don't we kind of see that the idea of madness is much broader and much more human and essential to the human condition than we like to think?
Hey, I would add that he was very concerned in his later work, in particular, with technocratic thinking. And he was very concerned about, he was always concerned with the difference between human beings and machines and how we can treat human, right in the divide itself. You treat somebody as a person or you treat them as a process of something like a mechanistic approach. And later, in as he was developing in the 70s and the 80s, further his ideas, he explored the idea of knowledge without love and how that was running the world and how that was a terrible threat. So I think today he would be very possessed of looking at what's happened with with artificial intelligence, with technology, with alienation that's involved, and more to the point, the double alienation, the alienation from the alienation we have, where we don't even recognize that we've got a problem.
Yeah, and also this theme of how humans are becoming more and more like machines. And he loved Philip Dick's comment that in the future, machines would be more human than humans are. And who knows, maybe that's where things are going, that AI will be more compassionate than the human race, which of course has so many problems with aggression and all the rest of it. But yes, that's I think that's all stuff that Lang would have a good time critiquing where things are going in the 21st century.
Do you think we have time for one or two more
Yeah,
questions?
we can keep going until people want to. We got a few
Oh,
more.
okay. Well,
Uh,
would you mind if we get Julie in first and we get back to you? So Julie, if you'd like to go ahead.
Sure, thank you. I actually wanted to address a comment that was made in the chat by Susan Long, and the question being, what was Lang's perspective on women and feminism? And I'm also curious about what his relationships were like, his more intimate relationships with men or women.
Well, I can make a comment to the first part of your question. He was very involved in the natural birth movement and home birth movement in the late 1980s, and worked with a group of women who were insisting on taking the power back from male doctors, that birth was a natural process and can be managed by women and can be owned by women. This was a very strong movement that was connected with rebirthing and all kinds of things, and he was very involved in that. So there was definitely a feminist dimension to his thinking.
yeah, I was, when I lived there in the 70s, that was going on. That was, of course, a decade when the feminist movement really took off. And he was very much involved in the natural childbirth. So he invited Frederick Laboyer, over to London to give public lectures on, of course, he was a god in the natural childbirth movement. Everyone involved in his network, including myself, both of my sons were born while I was living in London, and they both had home births.
So did
That was
mine.
very much the thing that people that were with Laing did. We didn't see it as something you do in a hospital, as though you're being treated, for giving life. And that was very much the feminist side of Lang's, at least his political behavior.
Very nice.
And now we have Walt. Yeah, thank you for that. Go ahead, Walt.
Hi, this is a question for Michael. I'm wondering if you could say more about what Lang said about love in the therapeutic context, in psychotherapy or psychoanalysis, and also in what book or books does he talk about that?
He doesn't really talk about it so much in his books. Again, this is one of the reasons we felt it was so important to have these annual symposia and to, come out with a book, because a lot of this stuff you only knew if you had a relationship with Lang. But one of my papers, in fact, in this book is on the concept of sympathy. That I got totally from Laing. He was he loved Max Shaler, who was a phenomenologist, studied with Husserl, and he was a fascinating thinker. He wrote a book on resentment, which came from Nietzsche, and he wrote another book on sympathy. And Laing loved this book, and how he distinguishes between sympathy and empathy. That empathy is sympathy without a heart. So for Laing, the basic thing going on in the therapy relationship is that we're expected to be sympathetic. But being sympathetic is not something that comes from greeting cards. It's a very deeply felt connection with a person suffering. You suffer with them, and he felt that was basically loving to be able to do that in your clinical work. Lang epitomized that ability. He could break down in tears with a patient. And in that regard, despite his alcoholism and all the dark stuff, he had a capacity for sympathetic connections that I've never seen in anyone else. But yeah, I had a really wonderful time going over that in the book. So you definitely read that chapter.
Thanks.
But there wasn't, he had a book which was in draft form, which the Laing estate won't let us see.
The book
called
on love.
Eyes of Love, wasn't it?
Never got finished, never got published.
Any thoughts as to why they're hiding it?
Well, that's a good question. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the people that were close to Laing have this odd thing about wanting to own him and not share him. So the people that run the archives in Glasgow, they won't let anybody in, to look at all this wealth of material that, comes from his notebooks and his unpublished work and all this stuff. For some reason, they won't let you get at it. So,
But it's because they're not allowed to by the estate.
now I'm
That's the
talking
thing.
about the estate, Doug. I'm talking. That's who's.
Yeah. I'm just saying the archive, the people at the Glasgow archive are just the intermediaries there, that they can't do anything more. I've tried, and they just say no. And it's because they contact the people who run it, who run the, Adrian Laing
It's
was,
his son Adrian who
yeah,
really is running
says
it.
no.
And for some
Yeah.
reason, Adrian just doesn't want to share with anyone.
Even though Adrian actually wrote a really positive blurb
Yes,
for our book.
you'll see that he endorsed our book.
Yes, like you say.
By the way, speaking of these books, I just want to plug another book of mine that just came out on existential psychoanalysis, also by Routledge, and it's an introductory work. Some of us here are involved in the New School, which is also an homage to the training that Laing provided in London. Very unusual way of training psychoanalysts, very informal. Um, and a bunch of us are now, doing this internationally. We have students in Europe and in North America, faculty spread all over. Doug, of course, is involved in it. Laing lives on in these contexts.
Well, it looks like that may have been the last question for today.
Yeah,
Ray, if you want to plug your
we may
physics
have
coming
we
out.
do have another question. Okay, but go ahead, Fritjof, please go ahead.
No, I was just thinking Laing lives on might be a very good last statement of our meeting.
And
Yeah.
now, Karen, do you wanna get a question in there before we wrap up? Just the last one, and you just need to unmute yourself there. You're muted. It's in the bottom left corner. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, I just have a quick question. If anyone can provide me with a reference of Laing's work on home birth and natural childbirth.
The Facts of Life.
The Facts of Life.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Good one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for coming. This was really a great discussion. And, of course, thank you, Michael and Yaf and Doug. That was this is a very exciting book. So I definitely recommend you get it. And also, it's obvious that so many of you are kindred spirits, know a lot of this history. So just stay in touch, I'm sure any one of us would be happy to hear from you and get your emails.
Can you just say, for people in Australia, for example, if you want to get hold of the book, I heard that readings in Melbourne is online, and it's also in its real presence. I think they are getting the book, but also you can do it online with the discount that is
If
provided.
you buy from Routledge, yes.
And we actually will be sending an email out in a few minutes with all that information as well.
James,
Right.
are you going to share the recording?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. It was really wonderful.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take
Bye.
care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you
Take
for
care.
everybody.